Hey, this is Ben from the band Amoral, all the way from Helsinki, Finland, and you're listening to Metal Wani.
Hello, Ben. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to Metlvani today. How are you doing?
No worries, thank you for calling. I'm doing good. We were just me and Masi, the other guitar player. We were at a radio station talking about the new album. Now I'm back home talking on Skype, so it's all good.
That's cool. So, the new album, Fallen Leaves and Dead Sparrows. So, I just got a chance to listen to the new singles, If Not Here, Where, and No Familiar Faces.
Yeah.
Now, I have to admit that they sound different and has a tinge of your classic Amoral sound.
Yeah, well, that's the idea, to always try to make them sound different, and they end up sounding different even if you don't try, because it's always like 2 years since the last album, so you just progress naturally.
That's absolutely true. Now, I think it's a concept album.
It is,
So
yes.
yeah. So could you tell us about that?
Sure, it actually turned out to be a concept album by accident. We started writing the songs, the music came first, and we noticed some similarities and some like thematic things going through the songs and the riffs, like, oh, we could use this melody also in the first song as well as the last song, and maybe in the somewhere in the middle as well. So we're like, well, this could work as a concept album. And then when I looked at the lyrics I was writing at the time, just different random sets of lyrics, like for this song, for that song, I noticed that I had like some reoccurring topics in the lyrics that when I looked at them, I'm like, well, this would actually make for a good story. Like, I could write a story around these topics and around this text that I'm doing, and that could work with the concept album and the musical concept of the whole package. And the concept was, I noticed when I started writing, even without thinking about it, I was writing a lot about aging, and because I turned 30 this year. I know it's not a lot, but yeah, I had a small age crisis, if I can say. And that kind of started thinking back, like, towards childhood and how, the usual, how time flies, and if I've made all the right decisions along the way. And then I started thinking about, I'm happy it hasn't happened to me, I hope, but what if you made one decision, like one huge decision, and you thought it was the right one, but it totally was not, and you could not undo it. It's you cannot take the step back, you can't turn it around. You made a mistake, and now you have to live with it. How would that feel? What would you do? What would go through your head after you realize the situation you're in? So I was kind of playing around with those themes, those ideas, and came up with the concept for the whole story. We have the character who in the story starts by looking back, whether it's an old relationship, or maybe it's his childhood, or a place or a country he used to live in, whatever the listener wants to see, and he's always longing to go back to somewhere, something that was better in his head before. And then he decides to make that final leap, like, okay, fuck this, I'm leaving this all behind and I'm going back. It used to be better, and he goes there, and for a while it feels like that. Okay, this is home. This is how it should be. But
feels like home.
Yeah. But he starts noticing some changes here and there. Like, this is a bit different. This was like this before. I remember this was a bit different, and he gets warnings from different people in different places. Like, maybe this is not the right decision. You should not be here. You should go back if you can. And of course, he refuses to listen. And once he realizes it on his own, it's too late. And that's how the story kind of ends.
Oh, sounds great.
Yeah, well, I think it turned out really cool, and it's not that simple as it sounds, and there's a lot of other topics dropped in some specific songs here and there. But that's like the main idea.
That's nice. So the cover art, which was done by Aki Sitala, he has done the cover for your two albums way back in 2005 and 2007.
Yeah,
so,
and also the Amoral Skull logo, which we use a lot on our albums and shirts and everything. He did that logo as well.
Yeah, so, when you both sit together, I mean, is it that you must have explained him the story, the concept behind the album, and then the cover art just basically reflects what your vision is?
Yeah, that's exactly how it went. We sat down for a few beers. We're old friends. We used to go to school together when we were like 7 years old forward. So we know each other way back, and that's how we always do it. We sit down and in the story. I play him some of the songs. I give him the lyrics and some of my ideas, and then we just started brainstorming and throwing ideas back and forth. And it was really quick when we started figuring out, like, okay, we need these characters here, and of course the title of the album being Leaves Dead Sparrows. I would like to see that in the cover as well. Because there's a lot of albums which have great album covers, but you can totally just see that they just bought a cool picture from somebody. It's like he already had the picture. It has nothing to do with the album. And for Amoral, I really wanted the cover art to always be custom made for that specific album. And you can totally see that this cover is as much a part of this album as the song titles and the guitar. So yeah, it was very important to make sure it's just exactly perfect.
That's wonderful. Now, there's a kind of a sound which I have noticed in the album. So there are progressive metal sound, then you have a tinge of death metal from your past.
Yeah.
You have, let's say, punk rock elements, little acoustic elements, and minute electronic elements. So 5 different sounds into one album. How do you make sure you connect them properly?
I don't know. I think this album is actually even more together than the last one, Beneath, that we did. That had a little electronic stuff, like you said, and the punk song in, which I don't think are that noticeable anymore in this one. But still, like you said, there's a lot of acoustic stuff. There's death metal. There's progressive stuff. There's all kind of stuff, and I don't know. You just have to go with your instinct, and when you write the song, like, make sure you're not doing something just for the sake of doing it. Like, I want a black metal part here just because it would be funny to have a black metal part. It has to make sense, and it has to sound good with the previous parts and as a whole with the whole album. But we always love to mix it up. We never ever, like any of our albums, we never did just one thing, because we just get bored so very easily. Like, if we would play just one style of music, like AC/DC for a whole album, we'd just be bored to death.
Right.
So
I was about to ask you that, how difficult does it get to make sure that each part, shines out rather than having them in the songs just for the sake of it?
It takes some doing, for sure. Our songs, they're long and there's a lot of parts, so it's not like we write them in a day or two. It takes a while for them to develop, and you have the idea, maybe half a year later you finish it off with the final riff and the final arrangement. But yeah, I think we're getting better and better with it, and especially with the arrangements wise. Like, anybody can write a riff. You can just get lucky and get a good riff out of your guitar by accident when you're 15 years old. And we had a bunch of good riffs already on the first album, but you definitely can hear that we're 10 years older just by listening to the arrangements and the mood. Like, compared to the first album and now this one, you can hear, like, okay, these guys have written some songs before.
With so many sounds, would you still agree that Amoral is a classic, it's about classic rock in the 21st century, or, let's call it as new wave of classic rock?
Well, that's kind of the idea, because classic rock, all the bands that people call classic rock, they're bands from the 60s or the 70s.
70s, right.
Yeah, there's the Pink Floyds and Led Zeppelins and Black Sabbath.
True.
And that's the whole, we kind of came up with that as a joke last time in the studio, that it's classic rock for the 21st century. So that's exactly what you said. It's new wave of classic rock. Same thing. Because it can really exist, because classic rock means something from the past. At least for now, till now. But we just think that it's so cool with Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd that they did so many styles of music during their career.
Right.
Like Led Zeppelin, they had a reggae song on album. Then they had a bunch of, like, very metallic, almost like Immigrant Song is a heavy song, and then the ballads and the acoustics and rock and roll. And that's what we want to be able to do. Anything we feel like. And when we look back 50 years from now, I want to see our back catalog and just for it to be rich with music, different kinds of albums and moods and songs.
for your previous album, you guys took underwater pics for the promo.
Yeah.
Now, I was disappointed that, I thought this time you might end up doing skydiving. But
we talked about it,
But it didn't happen,
Yeah, we really talked about it because we were like, how the hell are we going to top those last pictures? Because I think it's still one of the coolest pictures.
Absolutely.
Band pictures ever, because nobody ever does that. You've seen a bunch of pictures where people have photoshopped it to make it look like they're underwater.
True.
But for actually the whole band to get there with the photographer and it turned out really cool. And then we're just joking like, what could we do? Well, we can always just go skydiving.
Yeah, that would have been a good idea.
It would have been fun and great looking pictures, but it would have been kind of a hokey, like a joke kind of thing. Like, oh, okay, now they're dropping from the sky. And it wouldn't go with the whole theme and the vibe of the album. So we decided, like, okay, this is our prog rock album. Let's just go stand in the woods like the bands Camel and all those used to do in the 70s.
Right. Absolutely true. Now,
but maybe next album we'll be jumping off planes. I can't tell you.
Okay, so you can't tell that. Nonetheless, it's a very good idea. So, you're from Finland and your neighbor Sweden. So, both these countries are very popular when it comes to metal. Now, every time I fail to understand why is metal so popular in your country. It looks to me that both these countries fight with each other, in terms of who will surpass each other in terms of music.
There might be some truth to that also. But I've been asked that a lot, like how come there's so many good metal bands coming from this area of the world?
Right.
And I really believe that the scene keeps feeding itself. Because I know from my own experience, when I was 16 years old, and Children of Bodom came out, and I heard Stone, the old band of Roope Latvalas, who plays now in Bodom.
Right.
And that was the first time I heard stuff like that coming from Finland, because I always used to just listen to American bands for some reason, like Pantera, Metallica, Guns N' Roses. So I always thought, like, okay, all the good bands come from the US. And then all of a sudden, I hear bands that are just as good playing-wise and song-wise, and they're living right next door almost. Right. So that was very inspiring. Like, if they can do it, we can do it as well. And I'm sure that happens a lot here in Finland and in Sweden. Like, there's so many bands around where you live. Like, when you're a young kid playing guitar, you can go see all those shows. You see those guys on the streets and the music stores. And it's inspiring. You want to be one of them. You want to be as good as them. And the result is tons of bands and tons of really crappy bands also. But, of course, a lot of good bands at the top.
Right. I've even heard that the weather there is pretty much good. I mean, there are long winters. There's a lot of darkness and depression in the weather. So does that kind of help a musician to write some kick-ass stuff?
I think so. We don't really even think about it so much anymore. Of course, everybody just gets pissed with the winter. Like right now, just snowing and raining and it's miserable outside. So you tend to stay in. It's not like I'm going outside for a walk right now. I'm staying in all day and playing guitar and talking to you. So if it was beautiful and shining and the sun was out, and I would be out there eating ice cream and playing at that, So it helps. It helps that the weather is crappy, so you stay in more and you can write some depressing lyrics for sure.
Yep, that's surely cool. Now, you have made a radical change a few years ago. I'm sure you have talked about it as well. So you went more into the melodic side. So the vocalist, was he a limitation on the band? Because I felt as a death metal vocalist, he was good.
He was really good, yeah.
Yes, but as a singer, I kind of felt maybe, 50-50 kind of stuff. So do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. We all wanted him to, like, we're pushing him, maybe even too much looking back now. Like, oh, dude, take singing lessons. We need some more melodic vocals in here. And he wasn't a singer. That's the problem. And now he's much better at it. But back then, he was a great screamer and a growler. But when it came, like, we couldn't do Sebastian Bach type singing melodies by any stretch with him.
True.
And that's why we always were like more of a death metal band. Because if you listen back to our third album, I'm sure you can hear like all kinds of 80s hair metal riffs, and there's a lot of melodic stuff going on with the guitars.
Right.
But down to a point, and to be honest, we're kind of getting tired of doing just the screaming stuff. We did it for 3 albums, and we're hoping that with the 4th one we could do something a bit different. And he was taking lessons and trying to develop himself as a singer as well.
Right.
But then, as a shock, out of nowhere, he told us that he wants to leave the band. He maybe even a bit because the musical style was changing a bit
Right,
towards
yeah.
more melodic. I'm sure that
True.
had something to do with it, but also he wanted to focus on other things, play guitar more than sing and stuff like that.
Okay.
So
So,
when he actually decided to leave, that
mhm.
wasn't our wish, and we didn't want to let him go, but he knew what he wanted to do, and he was out. So that was our chance, somebody who could actually sing as well as scream. And that's how we started our search and found Ari, because we really stressed that we're not looking for somebody who sings in the same vein as Nico did.
Right.
We want somebody who can totally sing clean and melodic stuff as well. And Ari can perfectly do that.
Sounds great. Now, at the same time, his vocals are damn good in the album. I got the link from your PR, and I'm blown away with the album. I really like the different sounds you guys mix perfectly. So
Thank you very much.
During this phase, there was a backlash, when it comes
Yes.
to fans, and they were disappointed. So, from a personal perspective, did it matter to you guys the kind of response you got from the fans?
It did, of course. You don't want to hear people who used to buy your albums and like your band telling you suck and you're stupid and that was a bad decision. But we knew it was going to happen. Of course we knew. It was a drastic change and went overnight from being a death metal band to being a very melodic metal band.
Right.
Well, the good thing was we did the whole album with Ari in secrecy before we announced it. So none of the backlash would affect the music, and that was
True.
very important. Because if it would have gone like we just told the world that okay, here's our new singer, and then we've gotten the backlash, I'm sure it would have affected the music and we would have compromised and trying to please the fans because they were very vocal about their opinions once it was out. But I think we did the right thing by doing it in secrecy and taking our time and just doing exactly what we wanted. Like, this is how we feel at the moment in 2008.
Right.
This is the kind of songs we want to write. This is the kind of melodies. This is the vocals. And to hell with everybody else. We have to do what we feel like is right.
Oh,
And then the shit hit the fan once the songs came out and then
Alright.
the news came out.
So nonetheless, it was probably a good decision because it's better to be diverse rather than sticking to one particular thing.
Yeah, for sure.
and-
You have to.
Absolutely. Now, you toured Asia. I mean, you toured few Asian countries like China, Japan. As a musician, did you learn something from the trip, and which kind of gave you some ideas of incorporating them into the new album?
Well, unfortunately, we didn't really hear that many local bands or local music over there. Because when you're there, you're just surrounded by your own guys and traveling by bus or in trains and planes from
Right.
one gig to another. So it's not like we had tons of time to hang out in China and go to the local clubs to hear their traditional music and stuff like that. So I don't know if it affected musical-wise, but the trips always affect you, even subconsciously or not. You see new things, you meet new people.
Right.
And especially exotic places like that, like China or the Philippines, it's a whole new thing. So,
It's a
and
different
I love
world.
traveling. Yeah, and I really love traveling. I think it's the best thing you can do with your money is go see the world.
All right.
And so, yeah, I always take something back with me in my head from every trip I've done.
That's cool. You keep traveling, so you've played throughout Europe and recently in Asia as well. So do you see what do you feel about the comparison when it comes to two different cultures in terms of metalheads? I mean, I have heard a lot about Japan that the fans are very dedicated and very the fan following in Japan is better than any other Asian country.
It is very passionate and they're fanatic when it comes to the bands. They show up in the morning at the hotel to give you presents and they want to take tons of pictures and stuff. But then again, they're very polite when it comes to the actual shows. They're a lot of people just standing there and looking and enjoying the music and just trying to soak it all in. Of course, there's some action in the front and people screaming and headbanging, but a lot of them are just there to enjoy the music and they're very still and taking it easy, which is kind of weird. When you go to like Spain or Italy, those warm countries where people are just really aggressive and going crazy at the mosh pits and stuff like that. So
That's
there
true.
are differences for sure. For example, here in the northern countries, I think people are a bit spoiled. There's so many shows
Uh-huh.
that it's hard to get people going properly. They're like
Right.
standing around and like, oh, whatever, and having a beer in the back,
Mm-hmm.
like Norway, Sweden, some parts of Germany. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, China, Japan, and places in Europe like Spain and Italy have been very good for us.
You have met a lot of fans, while touring around the world. So sometimes you would have come across those people who would compare your sound to the other bands, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, what bands do they generally compare you
Um,
to?
we've been compared to all kinds of bands. It's funny because people hear your music so differently. Like
Right.
just this new song, the new No Familiar Faces, when it
Hmm.
came out, and people heard it over here in Helsinki, and they really liked it. But everybody who came talking to me about it said like, "Oh, it sounds like something else." Like somebody heard Guns N' Roses in the riff, like that sounds totally like Slash. I'm like, "What the hell? Where did you get that from?" And one other guy said, "We sound like the progressive rock band from Finland, Kingston Wall," and I had
Hmm.
no idea that comparison could even be made. And somebody heard something else. So it's funny hearing, like, I think it sounds like something, and you think it sounds like something else, and the third guy thinks it's something totally different.
Right.
So, but that's good, because then if everybody would say like, "Oh, that sounds like that," then you busted, like you stole from somebody, and you sound too
Right.
much like them. But we've been compared to a lot of things, especially now with Ari when he joined the band. A lot of people are like, "Oh, he's like young Sebastian Bach," which is pretty cool because Sebastian is one of my favorite singers.
That,
And
that-
I don't know, there's been some comparisons to bands like Opeth with the long songs and the acoustic
yes.
parts. And some of the technical stuff, since the early days, people are like, "Oh, that's a bit like Dream Theater," which some parts are, I don't know. But yeah, we've been compared to all kinds of bands. But people can't really put their finger on just one specific band, like, "Oh, you guys sound like
Absolutely.
them."
Right, right. That's the main point. I mean, you can't figure out. It has its own sound, it has its own vibe. That's more important.
Yeah, I hope so.
Wonderful. Now, what's the plan for 2014? I mean, you guys have an upcoming tour coming ahead?
We have some tours lined up. I hope they're gonna happen. Like, that's the thing with shows. There's so much talk all the time, like, "Oh, you guys are gonna play here and there," and
Mhm.
until I see the plane tickets, until I have them in
Right.
my hand, I don't believe you, because
Right.
we've been signed for so many tours during the 10 years, and then they fell through at the last minute. And we used to get so excited when like the first and second album came out, and the record label would call us like, "Oh, you guys could go out and tour in next month with this and this band." And we're like, "Oh, fuck yeah," and post it on the online on our webpage. And then
Right.
a week later, "Oh, it's cancelled, sorry." So, but I'm sure there's going to be at least a European tour, probably some things we're going to do in the UK as well, and of course
Okay.
some Finnish dates. That's all I know for now. I hope we can do something a bit further away, like hopefully Asia
That's
and
because, you have visited Asian countries, but, you forgot to travel to India.
I know, but I don't know why it's so hard. I think the scene is still pretty small there, because just now bands are starting to get over there. Like Children of Bodom just finally went to play there for the
Yes,
first
they
time.
went 2 years back. They came here. Now the frequency of bands coming here in India is better than how it was earlier. I don't
Yeah,
think there are probably 30, 40 odd bands have already toured India, and few have toured twice. So it would be great to have you guys here in India.
it would be beautiful. I'd never been to India, but I heard a lot of good stuff about it, so I'd love to see the country.
Wonderful. Now I'll end the interview on a very simple note. How would you define the new album in just one word?
Oh man, let's see.
This
One
question,
word.
this question always seems to take a lot of time.
Yeah. If I would be totally honest,
Hmm.
I would define it by the word great, because I love the album.
Hmm.
I really like it, and I've been listening to it a lot, and I'm so proud of it. I know it sounds terrible when somebody compliments himself on something he's done, but I think the album is just great.
Well, Ben, I hope the album gets a massive success throughout the world, and you go on tour as much as possible. Thank you so much for
Thank you
spending
very
some
much.
time with us. It's
It's
been a
fun.
pleasure talking to you.
Cheers. Have a good
And
day.